At a family barbecue, my dad announced I'd be gifting my house to my brother. My jaw dropped, and I stayed silent. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. Everyone around the table laughed, like it was a joke. Tate, my younger brother, sat there with that smug smile he always wears. Mom looked uneasy but didn't say a word. I could feel my hands tightening around my cup. Inside, anger was burning quietly, like a fire I couldn't let anyone see. I had worked for years, saving every penny, building a life I was proud of. And now, in a single sentence, my dad decided it all belonged to Tate. I remembered how he always got more attention, more praise, more freedom. I had learned early that being the quiet, responsible one sometimes meant being invisible. I stayed calm, though. I didn't yell or cry. Not yet. I smiled politely, nodded, and let the conversation continue. But in my mind, I was already planning. I needed to be smart, careful. Revenge wouldn't be about yelling, it would be about showing everyone the truth. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the barbecue over and over. I thought about the unfairness, the favoritism, the betrayal. I promised myself I wouldn't let it go. One day, everyone would see. Tate couldn't just take what I built. And when that day came, it wouldn't be loud. It would be perfect. I didn't know exactly how yet, but one thing was clear, I wouldn't stay silent forever. Everyone cheered my dad's decision, but inside, I was boiling. Stick with me while I share my story. I smiled politely, nodding along as if I agreed. I laughed at the jokes, clinked glasses, and acted like everything was fine. But my mind was racing. Every cheer for Tate felt like a punch. He sat there, chest out, clearly enjoying all the attention. The smug look on his face made my stomach twist. As I watched him, memories crept in from years ago. Birthday parties where Tate got the biggest cake, praise for every little thing he did, while my efforts were quietly ignored. School achievements, early jobs, even the way I handled family responsibilities, it never seemed to matter. He was always the golden child, and I was always expected to just step aside. The anger bubbled, but I kept it hidden. I refused to lash out, refused to ruin the gathering. My heart thumped, but my face stayed calm. Every word I didn't say was a seed, growing into something stronger. I told myself this wasn't the time for confrontation. I had to plan, to wait, to be smart. Watching my family celebrate Tate's moment felt like holding a live coal in my chest. I wanted to scream, to accuse, to demand justice. But I clenched my fists under the table and breathed slowly. Every smile I gave was a mask, every nod a promise to myself. I decided then, I would not be impulsive. I would let the fire inside simmer, feed it with patience. One day, the balance would tip. And when it did, no one would ignore what I truly deserved. Later that week, I found out something that made my blood run cold. Stick with me while I share my story. I had gone upstairs to grab a book when I heard whispers from the living room. My parents were talking in low voices, thinking I wasn't listening. Curiosity pulled me closer. As I pressed my ear to the door, my heart sank. Tate had been planting ideas, twisting words, making them believe my house should go to him. My dad spoke about family legacy and how it was meant for Tate, not me. Every sentence dripped with favoritism, but this time, it wasn't subtle. It wasn't a casual mistake, it was deliberate. The betrayal hit harder than anything before. Not just the unfairness, but the cold, calculated way they were being manipulated. My own parents were blind to the truth, completely convinced Tate deserved what I had worked for. I had always trusted them to be fair, to see who I really was. That trust now felt like glass, shattered and sharp. I stepped back quietly, heart hammering. Anger mixed with disbelief, but I couldn't let it show. This wasn't a fight to win with words, it needed careful moves. I knew then that I had to gather proof, to quietly collect the truth before anyone else noticed. Contracts, messages, anything that could expose the scheme. Sitting on the stairs, I started thinking about every detail: how to watch, how to record, how to protect myself. The first spark of a plan formed in my mind. I realized that staying silent was no longer enough. I needed evidence, strategy, and patience. For the first time, I felt purpose in the anger. Betrayal had awakened something sharp inside me. And I wasn't going to let it go unnoticed. I thought I was alone, until someone unexpected reached out. Stick with me while I share my story. After days of quiet planning, I finally decided to confide in someone I trusted. My cousin Joss had always seen through Tate's arrogance. We met at a small cafe, trying to act casual, but the tension was impossible to hide. I told Joss about my dad's shocking announcement and what I had overheard about Tate's schemes. Joss didn't seem surprised. Instead, a sharp look crossed their face. "I knew he was doing something like this," Joss said. "He's been hiding money and assets. He's been twisting family decisions to suit himself." Hearing it confirmed what I had feared. Tate's manipulations were bigger than I imagined. For the first time since the barbecue, I felt a sense of relief. I wasn't completely alone in this. Joss didn't just understand, they wanted to help. We started discussing quietly what could be done, ways to gather proof and protect what was mine. I realized I had an ally who knew the family dynamics inside out and could see through Tate's lies. Sitting there, I felt a spark of hope and purpose. The anger that had been smoldering inside me now had a channel. We brainstormed carefully, talking about strategies, keeping everything under the radar. Every idea felt like a piece of armor, giving me strength I hadn't known I had. By the time we parted, a plan had begun to take shape in my mind. It wasn't about confronting anyone yet. It was about precision, patience, and positioning. With Joss on my side, I felt capable of turning the tables. I realized that revenge wasn't just possible, it was starting to feel inevitable. For the first time, I knew I wasn't powerless. And that knowledge was dangerous, in the right way. I knew I couldn't fight them blindly, so I started gathering proof. Stick with me while I share my story. I spent the next few days moving carefully, making sure no one noticed my actions. I went through old files, scanned through emails, and quietly checked documents that were never meant for me. Every contract and statement I found told the same story. Tate and Dad had been planning this for months, quietly manipulating everything so the house would end up in his hands. My hands trembled at first, but I forced myself to stay steady. Each new piece of evidence felt like a weapon I could use, but I had to be smart. I labeled, organized, and hid everything where no one would stumble across it. The more I discovered, the hotter my anger grew, but it was mixed with a strange kind of calm. I was building something precise, something that could fail if I played it right. I checked and double-checked every detail. Numbers, dates, signatures, they all had to be perfect. Tate went about his day, completely unaware that I had begun seeing the cracks in his carefully constructed world. Every smile he gave, every boast he made, only reminded me why I had to be meticulous. I started imagining the moment everything would come together, the moment the truth would finally surface. But patience was key. I couldn't rush it, couldn't risk being discovered too soon. This was about control, not chaos. By the end of the week, I had a small collection of proof that made my head spin. It was enough to shake the foundations of their plans. I felt a quiet satisfaction. The game had begun, and for the first time, I held the pieces that could turn the tables completely. Tate didn't suspect a thing, and that made every step even sweeter. One night, I confronted Tate, and the truth exploded between us. Stick with me while I share my story. I asked him to meet me at a quiet cafe, acting like I wanted to smooth things over. He arrived with that same smug grin, thinking I was here to apologize or play along. I poured my coffee slowly, letting him talk first, listening carefully to everything he said. Then I started dropping small hints. Casual remarks about certain contracts, questions that seemed innocent but weren't. I watched his eyes flicker, a fraction of doubt crossing his face. He laughed it off, arrogant as ever, sure I couldn't see through him. "You've been busy," he said, smirking. "Planning something?" I smiled faintly, keeping my tone light. Maybe. Maybe I just noticed a few things that didn't add up. The shift was subtle, but it was enough. I could see him tighten, his confident mask starting to crack. I didn't raise my voice, didn't make threats. My calm exterior was a shield, hiding the storm inside. Every word I chose carried weight, every pause was deliberate. I felt my anger pulse, a mix of disbelief and fury, but I didn't let it control me. I needed him to feel the tension, to sense that I was no longer the powerless sister he had underestimated. Tate's arrogance wavered, and for the first time I saw a flicker of fear. He tried to regain control, deflecting, joking, but the atmosphere had changed. I wasn't just confronting him, I was warning him. By the end of the meeting, I knew the first seed of doubt had been planted. He didn't realize yet how carefully I was planning, how precise my next moves would be. But I could see it in his eyes. He finally understood that I was no longer someone to be dismissed. I realized revenge isn't about fighting blindly, it's about precision. Stick with me while I share my story. I started moving carefully, planting small hints that made my parents pause. I asked questions about finances, timelines, and decisions, acting casual while watching their reactions. At first, they brushed me off, but I could see uncertainty creeping into their eyes. Doubt was spreading quietly, exactly where I wanted it. Using the evidence I had collected, I pointed out contradictions in Tate's stories. Dates that didn't match, explanations that felt rehearsed, statements that seemed too convenient. I didn't accuse him outright, I just guided my parents to notice the gaps themselves. Every carefully chosen word chipped away at their trust in him. The family atmosphere began to shift. My parents looked puzzled, whispering to each other. Tate tried to maintain control, but the tension was growing around him. He smiled nervously, made excuses, but it wasn't enough. The careful structure he had built for years was starting to crumble, and I watched it with quiet satisfaction. For the first time in weeks, I felt a rush of power. Anger had turned into action, frustration had become strategy, and I realized I was no longer the passive one in this story. Every move I made was deliberate, every gesture calculated. I was shaping the outcome, not reacting to it. By the end of the day, the table had turned just enough. My parents were questioning what they once believed without hesitation, and Tate was losing the upper hand he had relied on for years. I finally felt in control, like the storm I had carried quietly for so long was finally being directed exactly where it needed to go. At a family dinner, I quietly dropped the bomb that changed everything. Stick with me while I share my story. I waited until everyone was seated, the room filled with chatter and clinking dishes. I placed a folder on the table, keeping my hand steady. No one knew what was inside. I let the tension build just enough before speaking. I think it's time you all see the truth, I said softly. The words were calm, almost casual, but carried weight. I opened the folder and laid out copies of contracts, bank statements, and messages that proved every scheme Tate had orchestrated. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just let the evidence speak. My dad's fork froze midair. His eyes widened as he scanned the pages, realization hitting him slowly. Mom's face fell, guilt washing over her features. She had believed Tate's lies without question, and now the truth was undeniable. Tate's smug smile vanished. He fumbled for words, anger flashing in his eyes, but he couldn't form a proper defense. Every excuse he had used crumbled under the weight of the proof I had collected so carefully. He was speechless, trapped by the consequences of his own manipulation. The room fell silent. The air was thick with shock and disbelief. I felt a strange calm wash over me, like the storm I had carried inside for so long had finally found release. Justice didn't need to shout, it needed precision, patience, and timing. And now it had arrived. For the first time I could see the fear in Tate's eyes, the doubt in my parents', and the satisfaction of knowing that I had turned the tables perfectly. My victory was quiet, but absolute. The betrayal that had haunted me for years was finally exposed, and I held control over the aftermath. Silence hung over the table, but I finally felt a weight lift. Stick with me while I share my story. My parents stared at the evidence spread before them. Words were hard to come by. My dad's voice shook as he finally admitted his mistake, the favoritism, the blind trust he had given Tate. Mom nodded slowly, guilt etched into every line of her face. It was uncomfortable, tense, but necessary. They couldn't deny the truth any longer. I took a deep breath and looked directly at them. I'm not giving my house to Tate, I said firmly, letting every word land. I earned it, and it's mine. I won't let years of hard work be taken from me. My voice was calm, but the resolve behind it was undeniable. Tate's face twisted with anger, disbelief, and frustration, but no amount of arguing could undo what had been revealed. Some relatives shifted uneasily, whispering to each other. The cracks in family relationships widened before my eyes. Old loyalties were questioned, and long-hidden tensions surfaced. There was sadness in the room, too. I realized that even though I had won, the family I once knew would never be the same. Bridges had burned, and some bonds might never heal. But I also felt something stronger: freedom, clarity, and the knowledge that I could stand up for myself no matter what. I sat back, letting the silence settle. Triumph mixed with a quiet sorrow, the kind that comes from winning but losing pieces of what you once cherished. The weight of betrayal had lifted, replaced by certainty. I had taken control of my life, protected what was mine, and faced the people I loved with honesty. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't painless, but it was real. And for the first time in years, I felt truly unshaken. Revenge doesn't have to be loud, it can be quiet, perfect, and unforgettable. Stick with me while I share my story. After weeks of careful planning, I made sure everything was secure. The house was legally protected, every document in order, every loophole closed. There was no chance Tate could challenge it, no way for him to take what was rightfully mine. I finally felt a sense of control I hadn't known in years. Tate tried desperately to save face. He smiled, made excuses, and attempted to convince others he was still trustworthy. But the cracks in his story were too obvious. No one fell for it. His attempts to manipulate perception failed, leaving him exposed and powerless. Watching him struggle to salvage his image was strangely satisfying, a quiet confirmation that the truth had taken hold. I could finally breathe. The tension that had weighed on me for so long lifted in a single, invisible wave. The anger, the fear, the frustration, they all settled into a calm clarity. I had won without shouting, without confrontation, without unnecessary drama. Every careful step, every patient move, had led to this moment. Sitting in the quiet of my home, I reflected on everything that had happened. Betrayal had hurt more than I could have imagined, but it had also forced me to be clever, patient, and resilient. I realized that intelligence and careful planning could outweigh cruelty and arrogance. The house wasn't just property, it was a symbol of what I had endured and what I had reclaimed. I didn't need revenge to be loud or messy to be satisfying. Sometimes, the most perfect victories are the ones that happen quietly, leaving no doubt about who truly deserved to stand strong in the end. Betrayal had tried to break me, but resilience and intelligence had won. Do you think I did the right thing by standing my ground, or should I have given them another chance? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.